Welcome to Conspiracist.
Glad to be here.
Today we're diving into something that honestly just keeps coming up. This idea. Could these shared memory glitches, what we call the Mandela Effect, actually point towards governments intentionally hiding something?
It's a persistent hypothesis, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
The Mandela Effect itself, it's named after that very common but wrong memory of Nelson Mandela dying back in the 80s in prison.
Right, when he actually passed away much later after being president.
Exactly. And it describes this phenomenon where loads of people share a memory that just doesn't line up with the accepted historical facts.
And our focus today is specifically on that claim.
Yeah.
Are governments actively covering up evidence related to these memory differences?
That's the core question we're exploring.
It's just wild how varied these things are. It's not just big historical stuff.
No, not at all. You see it everywhere. Pop culture, like the spelling of the Berenstain Bears. Is it ain or ain't?
Always gets me. Or that Sinbad genie movie people swear existed.
Right, Shazam. And then tiny details, too, like logos changing or bits of geography people remember differently.
So let's really get into the hypothesis itself. What are the actual arguments suggesting governments might be intentionally hiding proof?
Okay, so one line of thinking you see a lot, especially in online forums, is that maybe these shared false memories aren't accidental.
Meaning
They could be perhaps side effects, or maybe even the goal of some kind of government research, like experiments using subliminal images maybe, or altered news flashes designed to plant memories with the effects only showing up later.
wow, okay, so like large-scale memory manipulation tests.
That's the idea some people put forward. And they sometimes mention, declassified documents about past CIA experiments or mind control research as, well, as circumstantial evidence that governments have done things like this before, though usually without specific links to the Mandela Effect itself.
That definitely leans into a darker, more conspiratorial view of government research, but it raises questions, unsettling ones. What else comes up?
Well, there's another quite different angle. Some
Right.
suggest it's not the government causing it, but maybe some other force.
Like what?
Like this idea of a planetary consciousness or something similar that's sort of nudging us, drawing attention to these reality shifts through the Mandela Effect.
Okay, that's a very different explanation for the cause. How does that link back to government concealment, though?
Well, the connection there is that if governments are aware of these, let's say, more metaphysical or unconventional explanations, and they're actively ignoring them or pushing back against them.
Promoting only the standard psychological explanations instead.
Exactly. Then that could be seen as a form of information control or concealment,
Yeah.
downplaying alternative theories to maintain a certain accepted narrative.
I see. So it's less about creating the effect and more about managing the conversation around it. That's subtle.
It is. And then you get into more direct personal accounts. We saw one really striking story. Someone described experiencing something truly bizarre. They linked to the Mandela Effect, basically living 2 years of my life in a row, and nobody else noticing this time distortion.
Whoa. That's quite a claim.
It is. And their strong belief was that this personal, profound anomaly, and maybe others like it, are being deliberately erased or written out of history.
So a belief in active suppression of experiences that just don't fit the normal timeline or reality.
Precisely. And that feeling that your own experience is being denied or wiped seems to fuel the suspicion of a much bigger cover-up for some people.
You can understand how that would feel deeply invalidating. And then there's the idea that the evidence itself is being tampered with.
Yeah, that's another layer. The suggestion that even the lists people compile of Mandela effects, that those lists themselves might change.
Wait, so the list of things people misremember might change over time?
That's the worry some express. If the very record of the discrepancies isn't stable, it makes it almost impossible to study or get a handle on. It feeds directly into that narrative of ongoing active manipulation.
It's like trying to map something that keeps shifting under your feet.
Exactly. And finally, there's the censorship angle.
On social media, you mean?
The argument goes that when platforms take down videos or posts showing supposed glitches in the matrix, like, I don't know, an object disappearing or something weird happening.
Which could just be video edits or hoaxes, of course.
Of course. But within the concealment framework, some interpret these takedowns, especially if they seem overly strict or unexplained, as potential evidence of governments leaning on platforms to suppress anything that challenges consensus reality.
That connects online content moderation, which has many potential reasons, directly to a government suppression motive. It's quite a leap, But I see the logic within that specific worldview.
It requires assuming that motive, yes.
Yeah.
But it's part of the tapestry of arguments put forward.
Okay. So we've got these threads. Potential past experiments, suppression of alternative explanations, erasing personal anomalies, manipulating the records, and maybe even online censorship. It's mostly anecdotal, interpretive.
Very much so. Based heavily on personal experiences, interpretations of events, and connecting disparate pieces of information.
Right. So let's pivot now. What are the more, well, mainstream or scientifically accepted explanations for why large groups of people might share the same false memory?
Okay. The dominant view in psychology and cognitive neuroscience really focuses on how our memory works, or sometimes how it doesn't work perfectly. It's about the inherent fallibility of human memory.
So less about conspiracy, more about cognition.
Exactly. Key concepts here are things like false memories, genuinely believing you remember something that never happened, and the misinformation effect.
The misinformation effect. That's when something you learn after an event changes your memory of the event.
Precisely. You hear a detail later, maybe inaccurate, and it gets incorporated into your original memory without you realizing it. These theories suggest the Mandela Effect is probably a natural outcome of normal memory processes.
It makes sense that our brains aren't perfect recorders. Can you break down some of the specific cognitive mechanisms involved?
Sure. One big one is source monitoring failure. This is basically difficulty remembering where a memory came from.
Like, did I actually see that, or did someone tell me about it, or did I just imagine it?
Exactly that. You remember the information, the what, but not the how or where you got it. And importantly, just imagining something vividly or hearing it suggested repeatedly can make you much more confident that it was a real memory.
So suggestion plays a big role. That connects to why some therapists are cautious about certain memory recovery techniques, right? The risk of implanting false memories.
Absolutely. It shows how malleable memory can be. Then there are specific models of how false memories form.
Okay.
There's the fuzzy trace theory, for instance. It suggests we store memories in two ways: a detailed verbatim trace and a more general gist trace. False memories often pop up when we rely too much on the gist and fill in the blanks with plausible but wrong details.
So remembering the general idea but getting the specifics mixed up.
Kind of. Then there's the strength hypothesis. Simply put, common information, even if it's wrong, can feel more true or memorable than less common, correct information. Like a popular misquote overshadowing the actual quote.
Makes sense. What else?
The construction hypothesis emphasizes that remembering isn't like playing back a recording. It's an active reconstruction each time you recall something. And every time you reconstruct it, there's a chance for errors or distortions to creep in.
So memory is dynamic, not static.
Very much so. And the skeleton theory is similar. We might store a basic framework, a skeleton of an event, and then unconsciously flesh it out with details later, which might not be accurate.
It's really a complex picture of encoding, storing, and retrieving information, with potential pitfalls at every stage.
Definitely. And it's not just happening inside one person's head in isolation.
Right. The social aspect seems huge here.
Right.
How does group interaction affect these false memories?
Hugely. Social transmission can be a powerful amplifier. If you're in a group where everyone seems to share the same incorrect memory, you're more likely to conform and believe it yourself. It reinforces the error for everyone.
Peer pressure for memories, almost.
In a way, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Though interestingly, research also shows the flip side. Sometimes talking about memories in a group can actually reduce errors because people can point out inconsistencies or correct each other.
So it can cut both ways depending on the group dynamic.
It seems so. That UChicago News piece you mentioned had some relevant findings too.
Yeah, about people tending to remember and forget the same kinds of things.
Exactly. It suggests there are common patterns in how human memory works. Shared vulnerabilities to certain kinds of errors, rather than pointing to some external manipulator pushing specific false memories.
And they use the Fruit of the Loom logo example, right?
They did. That widespread false memory of a cornucopia behind the fruit. Their experiments suggested people might falsely add it, because we often associate plates or bowls, like cornucopia shape, with fruit, even though the logo never had one. It shows how our own internal associations can create these errors spontaneously across many people.
An intrinsic bias, almost. What about the Bader-Meinhof phenomenon? Does that fit in?
Yeah, the frequency illusion. That's when you learn about something, maybe a Mandela Effect example, and suddenly you start noticing it everywhere or hearing everyone talk about it.
But it's not actually more common. You're just primed to notice it now.
Exactly. Your awareness is heightened, making it seem more prevalent or significant than it might objectively be. It can make the effect feel very real and immediate.
Okay. And there was also a mention of a specific experimental task, the DRM paradigm.
Right, the D. Schrodinger-McDermott task. It's a standard way psychologists study false memory creation in the lab.
How does it work?
You give people lists of related words like bed, rest, awake, tired, dream. Later, when you test their memory, they'll often strongly but falsely remember seeing the word sleep, even though it wasn't on the list.
Because it's so strongly associated with all the other words.
Precisely. It demonstrates clearly how our brain's tendency to link related concepts can directly lead to creating memories for things that didn't happen.
So we have this whole suite of psychological explanations backed by research that can account for shared memory errors without needing, well, a government plot.
Pretty much. And you also have to consider just the sheer volume of information we process constantly. Statistically, it's almost inevitable that some wires will get crossed in similar ways for different people, leading to shared misrememberings just by chance and the way our brains work.
That makes sense. Oh, and anchor memories were mentioned too. What's the idea there?
The idea is that sometimes we have a really strong, maybe emotionally charged memory, the anchor. And this strong memory might then distort our recall of other related details to make them consistent with the anchor, even if those related details become inaccurate in the process.
So a core memory sort of pulls other nearby memories out of shape.
That's a good way to put it. It makes us resistant to accepting a different version of events if it conflicts with that powerful anchor memory.
Okay. So when we try to evaluate the evidence for intentional government concealment against all these psychological factors, how does it stack up?
Well, objectively speaking, the claims about government concealment rely heavily on anecdote, interpretation, and connecting dots that aren't necessarily linked. There's no real, systematic, verifiable proof that stands up to scrutiny.
Nothing concrete or independently confirmed.
Not really. Whereas the psychological explanations, false memory, source monitoring errors, suggestibility, social transmission, cognitive biases, these are all well-documented phenomena supported by decades of empirical research. They offer plausible, understood mechanisms for how these shared memory errors could arise naturally.
So the scientific consensus leans heavily towards these internal cognitive processes.
Overwhelmingly so. That's not to dismiss the subjective experience of people who feel absolutely certain their memory is correct and reality has changed.
Because that feeling can be incredibly strong and convincing for the person experiencing it.
Exactly. The conviction is real. But the most likely explanation, based on evidence, points to the quirks of memory, not a conspiracy. The gap between that strong subjective feeling and the objective evidence is really at the heart of the fascination with the Mandela Effect.
It highlights that disconnect between how we feel we remember and how memory actually functions.
Yes, it's a powerful reminder of that.
Okay, let's quickly run through some of those classic Mandela Effect examples and how these psychological factors might apply. Not to say definitively this is why, but just exploring possibilities.
Sure. Take Jif versus Jiffy peanut butter.
Yep.
That's likely just simple brand confusion, maybe confusion with Skippy, or just the sound feels right. Very common type of error.
Okay, Looney Tunes versus Tunes.
Could be misreading. Maybe the spelling did vary slightly in some old materials. Or just the Tunes part feels more intuitive because they're cartoons.
And the big one, Berenstain Bears. AIN versus EIN.
That's often put down to pronunciation versus spelling. We might say it closer to Batstein, so we assume it's spelled that way. A common phonetic confusion.
Sketchers without the T.
Just an easy detail to overlook or misremember. Our brain might insert the T because Sketch has one.
Fruit Loops.
That's just intentional branding, the fruit spelling.
Yeah.
People might remember it as fruit because that's the standard spelling. Simple error.
Okay, those seem fairly straightforward. What about historical or visual ones, like King Henry VIII holding a turkey leg?
That image is pervasive in pop culture, often used humorously, but it's not in famous portraits. It's likely a misattribution, an image created later, maybe in cartoons or parodies, that's become cemented as a memory of the actual historical figure.
Or the Monopoly Man's monocle.
Classic confusion, most likely with Mr. Peanut from Planters, who does have a monocle. Their appearances are somewhat similar, top hat, formal wear, easy to conflate details.
Right. And Fruit of the Loom again, the cornucopia.
As we discussed, likely a strong shared false memory, perhaps triggered by that association between fruit and containers, or maybe even some early obscure advertisement that's long gone but influenced memory.
The Sinbad genie movie, Shazam.
This was fascinating because so many people feel certain. It's probably a conflation maybe with the Shaq movie Kazam, general genie tropes, combined with strong suggestion and social reinforcement online. A powerful collective false memory.
Star Wars. Luke, I am your father.
The actual line is, "No, I am your father." The Luke version is just stickier, more dramatic. It's become the culturally remembered version through sheer repetition, even though it's wrong. A perfect example of misquotation taking over.
A mirror, mirror on the wall.
Exactly. The actual line is magic mirror on the wall. But mirror, mirror flows better, maybe, or has been used in so many other adaptations and fairy tales that it's overwritten the original in popular memory.
Mickey Mouse's suspenders, people remember them, but he doesn't usually wear them.
Right. He wears shorts, usually red ones with big yellow buttons. The suspenders might be a detail people's minds add in because it fits the general old-timey cartoon aesthetic, or they confuse him with another character briefly. Schema filling in the blanks.
Sally Field's Oscar speech. You like me. You really like me.
She actually said something more like, "I can't deny the fact that you like me. Right now, you like me." The misquote is shorter, punchier, and perhaps captures the perceived emotion better, so it's the one that's stuck and gets parodied.
Curious George having a tail.
He's depicted without one. People likely assume he has one because, well, monkeys generally do. It's an assumption based on typical category knowledge overriding the specific visual memory.
And finally, Houston, we have a problem. From Apollo 13.
The actual transmission was more like, "Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here." The movie used the slightly altered, more dramatic phrasing, "Houston, we have a problem." So it's a mix of the real event and its popular dramatization blurring together over time.
It really shows the variety of ways these memory errors can happen. Confusion, suggestion, misattribution, cultural repetition, filling in gaps.
All playing a role, likely in combination for many of these effects.
Okay, one last point that came up in the source material, this idea that maybe fewer new Mandela effects are being reported now compared to, say, a few years ago.
Yes, there's an observation, particularly in online communities dedicated to this, that the peak reporting might have been around 2016 to 2018, and it's sort of tailed off since then.
Any thoughts on why that might be, assuming it's an accurate observation?
Well, there could be a few reasons. One is simply increased awareness and understanding. As the concept of the Mandela Effect became more widely known, maybe people became more skeptical or better equipped to recognize simple memory errors for what they are, rather than labeling everything a Mandela Effect.
So the novelty wore off and critical thinking increased.
Possibly. Another idea is that maybe the biggest or most common effects, the ones shared by the largest number of people, like Berenstain or Mandela himself, were identified early on during that peak period.
And subsequent ones are maybe more niche or less widely experienced.
Could be. It might also just be the natural life cycle of an online trend or topic of fascination. Intense interest for a period, followed by a gradual decline as attention moves elsewhere.
A sort of saturation point was reached, perhaps?
That's a plausible way to think about it. The initial burst of discovery and cataloging might have simply slowed down naturally.
Okay, so to kind of wrap this all up, we started with this intriguing and, for some, quite compelling hypothesis. Are governments hiding evidence about the Mandela Effect?
We looked at the arguments supporting that potential experiments, managing explanations, suppressing anomalies, manipulating records, alleged censorship, mostly based on interpretation and anecdote.
And then we contrasted that with the significant body of work in psychology and cognitive science.
Right. Explanations like false memories, the misinformation effect, source monitoring errors, social reinforcement, cognitive biases, all offering scientifically grounded reasons for why these shared memory discrepancies occur.
And the conclusion seems to lean heavily towards the latter explanations, doesn't it?
Based on the available evidence, yes. While the feeling of certainty for those experiencing the Mandela Effect is undeniable and subjectively very real, the objective data and established science point towards the natural functioning and occasional malfunctioning of human memory as the primary driver.
It doesn't necessarily make the experience less weird or unsettling for the person, but it provides a different framework for understanding why it might be happening.
Precisely. The power of our collective memory, how it's shaped, how it can err in consistent ways across populations, and how it sometimes clashes so strongly with objective records. It remains a truly fascinating area. There's still much to learn about the nuances of memory.
Absolutely. It definitely leaves you thinking about how much we can truly trust our own recollections, individually and collectively.
A thought-provoking question indeed.
Thanks for listening to Conspiracist.